Thanks for tuning in to the YouTube space of Niti, the Policy Lab. Today's conversation centers around the COP30 dialogue, better known as the Conference of the Parties. Held in Belem, this dialogue on climate governance posed some questions worth answering. To answer all of these, we feel privileged to welcome Dr. Anamitra Anurag Danda, a senior fellow with the ORF's Energy and Climate Change Program. As a seasoned environmentalist and a policy expert, he's the one to know it all.
COP30 event, which is going to be held in Brazil, is already seen as a very turning point, right, for the global climate action. So, according to you, what are your views about it basically, and how the climate agenda will be different compared to the previous COPs, due to this conference?
So as you know, this is the 30th conference, right?
Hmm.
And all of these years have been spent basically negotiating as to what we should collectively be doing to address the climate challenge. I don't think we have the time on our side to be negotiating any further. It's time to get down to action because there are multiple areas on this planet where the impacts of climate change are very visible in terms of people's lives and livelihoods, in terms of what's happening to our oceans, in terms of what's happening to the natural world. So I don't think we had the time on our side, neither the patience. I think the world is running out of patience. And therefore, I expect this COP to be very action focused as opposed to trying to work out the nitty-gritty of the convention. So that could be a major departure. And I wish that is how it is.
Definitely, there is. I mean, I'm also very hopeful about this event to be focusing on these type of changes. So yeah, I mean, definitely. And so the climate change conversation, right? So it has maybe it has definitely changed over the years, right? And is this no longer limited to emission targets? Only has But it has only evolved to include adaptation, finance, justice as well. I mean, it is like a whole. It has just incorporated itself into these major ideas and institutions. So do you see this transformation of discourse as more of an inclusive process, or are we still having a very hard time sharing the blame equality between the global north and south?
No, I mean, I think they should have occurred much earlier, right? I don't know why it has taken us so long to bring in the issues that you just mentioned about adaptation, about it being a just transition, about the transition being equitable. Because if we understand the science of it, that there is physics and chemistry involved in climate science. And if we understand it well, we should have known from the very beginning that if we are able to manage emissions, say, for example, if we are able to manage it today, the impacts of climate change would still be visible over the next 300 years to 1,000 years. There's a huge time lag between emission action and for that to yield the desired results. Right? This is basic science. So we should have been mindful of this basic scientific information from the very beginning. Nevertheless, over the years, adaptation, loss and damage have been brought into the discourse. When we realized that the mitigation action or the efforts being made to contain greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 in particular, is not happening at the rate we would have liked it to see. And then we realized that if this is the case, a large section of the global population would be impacted. And therefore, there has to be a state of readiness to be able to deal with. That's how adaptation came into the discourse. And again, thereafter, we realized that even if we are in a state of readiness, there would be certain amount of damage that cannot be avoided. And there would be certain amount of losses um, that are a given, and therefore damage and loss, although popularly it is called loss and damage, it has been brought into the discourse. Now, again, if you look at it, impacts of climate change do not play out equally or even evenly throughout the global society, or even within national and subnational societies. All of us who are now in this discussion are of a similar kind. Our lives do not get disrupted, so to say, by heavy rainfall. All of us are inconvenienced, but our lives are not disrupted. But think of a fish farmer whose ponds get flooded and all his fish crop is gone. Right? That's his living. His life is disrupted. Right? So the impacts are not necessarily the same. If you look at the city of Delhi now with such poor air quality, most of you can afford to be indoors. Think of the person who drives an auto rickshaw. She or he can't be indoors and will have to be out in that bad atmosphere trying
Definitely.
to make a living. Right? So it does not impact equally. And therefore, it is very important that whatever action is planned or implemented, it is not for people like you and me. It's for everybody. Right? And so I think while it is rather delayed, it's a good sign that all of this is now very much part of the conversation.
Definitely, these ideas should, I mean, in general, what we see and how the climate affects everyone around us, right? So, I mean, it's something that should be incorporated into every sphere of our life because ultimately it'll just have an impact on us, and we constitute all of these things. So, yeah, definitely, I do completely agree with you on that one. And so. I also wanted to ask that so India, right? So India usually points out that securing its development objectives is not possible without uh, environmental sustainability, right? So uh, what are your views on about India's stance as we, approach COP30, and what type of leadership can India provide in the global climate debate?
See, we all need to recognize that India and China are unlike any other country in the world. These are the two most populous countries, right?
Definitely.
And therefore, these are also the two countries that did not have the historical emission that the developed world has had.
Hmm,
Neither are these two countries like other developing countries in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. Right? So India and China have have a very strange position globally.
hmm,
They cannot behave like the developed countries. Neither can they behave like developing countries. Because if you look at the current emission of the top three emitters, India is number one. Sorry, China is number one,
I know.
and India is number three, right? With the USA in the middle, which has historical emission responsibilities. India and China do not have the historical responsibility. While India does demand that the right to develop the way the developed world has developed in the past,
Hmm,
and that demand is very legitimate. There is no doubt about it. But at the same time, India needs to be mindful of the fact that the historical development of the developed countries came at a very grave environmental cost.
definitely.
And we are all bearing that cost in terms of climate change, in terms of loss of biodiversity, so on and so forth. And therefore, India, while wanting to develop at a fairly rapid pace, cannot take the same path that historically countries have taken to become developed. India will have to define its own development trajectory, which is more efficient than what it was historically. It is resource light, and therefore India will have to find ways. Because just imagine for a moment if all of us Indians were to have the same footprint, material footprint, carbon, water, other resources, the same footprint as an average citizen of the United States. The planet Earth cannot simply support that rate of consumption. We don't have that kind of material on this planet, right? So there are limitations to what is realistically possible, what is physically possible. So while India needs to develop, people need to be out of poverty, people need to be secure in their lives and livelihoods. It cannot be the same trajectory that, say, for example, the United Kingdom took when it was developing, or for that matter, France, USA, or all the developed countries that we see today that have developed over the past 200, 150 years. That cannot be the same trajectory. So India's position, along with China's, is rather unique. No other country knows how to handle this kind of a population. No other country knows how to feed this kind of a population or to take care of this kind of a population. And yet, we cannot afford to have the same material footprint that the developed world has. Right?
I mean, definitely, considering the culture and as well as ecological biodiversity of India, we it definitely makes sense. I do completely, agree with you on that point. And now I would like to ask about the subject of climate finance, right? So the subject of climate finance gets a lot of attention and remains one of the most controversial topics in international negotiations. And based on your experience, uh, what could be the reasons that these financial pledges do not lead to, these impactful actions? And also, which changes would make make this climatic finance sector more favorable and accessible to further underprivileged communities?
See, there are two challenges to this.
Hmm.
One is there isn't enough money on the table to be able to do all that needs to be done to address the climate challenge. And when I say to address the climate challenge, meaning how to bring down emissions and how to secure people's lives and livelihoods and natural systems. All of this is going to need money. With money, what we can do is get or develop technology that is less resource intensive, that is not greenhouse gas based or emits greenhouse gases. So that's the money part of it. It's not that there is no money available. Some amount of money is, of course, available. How do we get that money to populations, societies, and communities that need it on priority? Say, for example, even if money were to be spent in India, it is not for people like you and me. It's for people who are dependent on primary production systems. As I said, gave you the example of a fisherman. Right? How do we get money to the community of fisherfolk, to the community of farmers, to coastal communities that are now faced with the climate challenge? Now, because this is public money, this is not private money, this is not a donation that you and I are making, there is this question of accountability of how is this money being spent, on what it is being spent, what is the outcome. So there is this mechanism called MRV, monitoring, reporting, and I think verification, right? Now, complying with the MRV requirements is itself an expensive proposition. Supposing, you were to give money coming in from the adaptation fund or the green climate fund or all the other funds that have been made available, are our panchayats equipped to report or comply with the MRV requirements. They're not. That capacity is yet to be built into the system, right? And therefore, it's an expensive proposition to be able to meet the MRV requirements. And therefore, we often see that communities that need the money most are yet to receive it. That money is either sitting with the national government or it is sitting with the subnational government, but not necessarily the last governing structure, right? In our case, it's a panchayat. In other countries, there are other governance mechanisms. So, for example, countries like Tuvalu that are threatened, their very existence is threatened by rising sea levels. If that money were to sit with just the central government of Tuvalu, I don't know, it might be the only government in Tuvalu, then it's one kind. But if there are layers of governance structures, as we have, or most countries have, then it is problematic, then it is complicated. So two things. One, as I said, is the amount of money available, and two, meeting the accountability requirements of that public money being spent for a certain purpose and ensuring that the outcomes are the ones that were desired for. So that's the money challenge.
Definitely, definitely. I do agree with you in this scenario. Mm. So now I would like to, introduce you to our other co-host, Avisha. She'll be taking over the podcast right now. So, Avisha,
Yes, thank you, Sai Bhaiya. Sir, my first question to you is like, sir, you have been in a close collaboration with Sundarban regions, like which is one of the most beautiful regions in India, and you must have an extravagant experience there. Sir, but which is also to do with the fact that climate change is not an abstract issue. There, rather, it is the reality that one lives with. What can be the global approach to resilience and adaptation as a lesson from such fragile ecosystem?
Okay. Yes, I have spent most of my working life in the Sundarbans region. This is the 29th year of my working there. And it indeed is the microcosm of all the global challenges that one can possibly think of. But Sundarbans also has lessons for all of us in terms of, what resilience can or what it should look like. Because it is such a dynamic area, it is not only the people, their lives and livelihoods, but also the natural system that are used to what I call the permanent impermanence. Everything is moving around, nothing is permanent. An island that has a certain shape today will probably have a different shape next year, after the monsoon season, or after a cyclone. The people and the natural system are used to these changes. However, people like you and me, who live in more stable areas, have forgotten this fact of life of permanent impermanence, for the simple reason that the period that is known as the Holocene, which is the last 10,000 years or so, has been an extremely stable climatic condition. So we've come to assume that this is how it is, this is how it has been, this is how it will be. Right? So we've moved away from the notion of things being mobile and impermanent. If you look at our ways of life, if you look at settled agriculture that has developed over the last 10,000 years within this period of what I'm referring to as the Holocene, has given us this sense that if I, sow paddy or wheat at a certain point in time, the weather conditions will be such that in so many days' time, I should have a crop fairly in a certain manner. In South Asia, and I'm sure this is true for all other traditional societies, if you look at our festive calendar, they coincide with different harvest times, right? Different seasons, starting of the season or ending of the season. Again, this was fine so long the weather followed a pattern. That pattern is now being disrupted. It would have eventually been disrupted in any case, because climate on planet Earth has not been uniform. It has changed from time to time. One, that change has occurred over a very long period of time, and therefore communities, including human communities and natural systems, have had time to make adjustments. But due to rapid emission over the last 2 centuries or so, and the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, that change is happening at a much rapid pace now. And therefore, the lack of adjustment is the problem. Change in climate per se is not the problem. Our inability to adjust to the changes because of the rapidity of the changes is the problem. And Sundarbans teaches us this.
So it's really insightful to hear how people of Sundarbans easily adapt to changes in the environment, which definitely makes their life more easier. So my next question is the term nature-based solutions is like widely used in climate policy talks nowadays. So do you think that these solutions lead to a better future for humanity, or do they merely serve to cover up the existing problems with their ingenuity?
See, all solutions that you can think of, all are in some way nature-based, right? There is nothing that we can do discounting nature. However, the nature-based solution that you are referring to is of a particular kind that is being put to use to deal with the impacts of climate change. I would say that rather than nature-based solution, our aim should be to look at solutions that are nature positive. And when I say nature positive, meaning that the outcome not only benefits us as human societies, but is also beneficial for natural processes. Because if these natural processes are to be disrupted, our existence on planet Earth will be disrupted. We cannot see, as I was saying, that during the Holocene, we lost the concept of impermanence. We thought none of things are permanent. Similarly, as human civilization has progressed, we've come to view ourselves as if we are sitting outside the natural system, which is not the case. Take water and air, for example. In the absence of these two elements, our existence cannot be ensured at all. Right? If you look at our food, it is produced through natural processes. If you look at our medicines, again, it is the same thing. If you look at our industrial processes, again, they're very much the same thing. We are mimicking or reproducing natural processes at an industrial scale within an industrial facility. Right? So everything in that sense is nature-based. It's just that we need to focus ourselves on nature-positive solutions so that, as I said, the outcomes are better for us and help not disrupt the natural processes. Or better still, if some of these disruptive processes can be restored and repaired. Right? And it might be a combination of nature-based solution and some solutions that are not necessarily nature-based in that sense. For example, for coastal areas, Sundarbans being one, so I will keep referring to examples from coastal areas. For coastal areas, protection against waves is an important thing. Otherwise, you would not be able to maintain lives and livelihoods of people. A seawall, which is a concrete structure, as opposed to a combination of it being a structure with also vegetation, with also corals, then adds to the natural processes. Right? So nature-based is yes, okay to talk about, but I would emphasize that we rather need nature-positive solutions.
So absolutely, I completely do agree with this view that we shouldn't only care about us, but we should care about the nature as well. So sir, my question was that global shift to cleaner energy has made the concept of just transition more relevant than ever. But sir, in India, would the transition be fair considering that it would involve taking care of and supporting traditional energy sector workers and communities? Because definitely it's an old practice in India as well.
See, there are two aspects to this. As you refer to the people who are from the traditional sector, say, for example, the coal mining sector. People who have been coal miners all their lives, can they be re-employed into something else? No, they can't. Especially the people of my generation, they certainly can't be re-skilled and say, now you become, a solar panel operator or some such. That cannot happen. So we will have to find ways to support these people through a pension scheme or some such, right? Through pension schemes, through health schemes, so that they have certain amount of money to subsist. Their healthcare issues are taken care of. So this is one kind of justness. But and if you look at the Indian population in its entirety, this section of population is fairly small. Those who have been traditionally in the coal mining sector, as opposed to the larger section of the population. And therefore, each one of us, where if we were asked to make a contribution towards that pension scheme, it should not be difficult, right? The other justness is between countries. So people who have historically contributed need to make monetary contributions to those who now need to make this transition. Why should the responsibility of this pension scheme be only restricted to people like you and me? It should also be people in the United Kingdom. It should also be people in Germany, France, etc. So that's the justness about it. Germany, for example, uh, shut down its nuclear power facilities and subsequently its thermal power facilities. Of course, it has reversed its decision and has restarted some of the the thermal power stations. We haven't tried anything of that sort yet, but if this transition has to happen, and it must happen, we will have to ensure that the population that is directly affected by this transition will have to be supported. Some of them, the younger lot in particular, may be re-employable, reskilled and re-employable, but a certain section for sure is not going to be reskilled and not going to be re-employed. So essentially, we will have to, give them retirement, so to say, and give them the retirement benefits so that they can live with dignity.
Yes, sir. I do agree that it's definitely important to even empower those people who are affected by these changes. So my last question to you is that it's really amazing that you have been working in this field for over 20 years now. And sir, what still makes you believe in good things that in sustainability and development? And what would you tell the youth, like all people around us, that are trying to create a significant impact in climate crisis today?
Uh, Good that you asked me this question, because are there times when I feel helpless, when I want to throw up my hands and go home? Yes, there are times when I am extremely dejected. I feel like a failure. Yes, there are times as such, but I keep going. I keep going because I firmly believe, and I have a mantra, which I call impossible is nothing. And when I say impossible is nothing, meaning that we can have aspirations, which we can chase and which we can attain, right? There was a time when people thought or aspired to scale Mount Everest. Eventually, humans scaled Mount Everest. I set a personal goal at the very beginning, I said 2 years ago, to run a full marathon. In 3 years' time, I'll be 60. Not a great time to get started, but that was an aspiration. And I attained that goal. It is only humans who are capable of defining these aspirations and chasing those aspirations. That's what makes us human. Can you think that a crowd wanting to scale the Everest or wanting to run a marathon? No, that's not going to happen. A cow does not think along those lines. It's only humans that think along those lines. And if humans have decided that we need to manage our emissions, we will be able to manage our emissions. There is no doubt about it, right? I mean, humans will certainly not go extinct because they were unable to manage their emissions. Humans might go extinct because of a major volcanic eruption, a major meteorite hitting planet Earth, or some such, right? And if I look at people like you who are putting their minds to it, sooner than later, this is going to happen, right? And therefore, I believe that, yes, we've lost time. Yes, we could have been better. Yes, many lives are currently being impacted, needlessly, so to say. But it is still possible to be able to fix this. It is the younger lot who will be able to do it. I take the blame for my generation. And when I am speaking to younger people like you all, I am tended to tender an apology to all of you, to the younger people. The reason being, my generation had all the necessary information to take necessary actions to correct ourselves and not put the global earth system to a situation where it is now. If I look at my parents' generation, they did not have all the necessary information. My generation did, but failed to take the corrective measures. Your generation has the will, as you're already displaying it, has the information and the wisdom of people like me who've made mistakes and have the willingness to learn from these mistakes. The mistakes I have made and learned from, you don't need to make those same mistakes, right? And that's what keeps me going. I think it is possible. I'm sorry for what we've done to your planet, but at the same time, I am hopeful that you guys will be able to fix it in your time, and whatever people like me can do to be able to make that happen, all the help that your generation might need is what I am more than happy to provide.
Uh, so I wanted to ask something. So when you completed that marathon, it's something that you have been, preparing and, manifesting for 2 years, last 2 years. And when you completed it, what was going through your mind at that time? Uh,
It's a weird sense of emptiness. It does not seem like an achievement. What happens is, because it's a fairly difficult goal to achieve. Once you achieve the immediate thought that strikes you, now what? And obviously you don't have an answer immediately. Now what? And it gives you a sense of emptiness. And when I look back now that it's been about 2 weeks since then, I am also able to reflect on what I did, what I could have done better, what I should not have done at all.
So, sir, finally, I really want to thank you for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. So, this conversation has offered a deeper understanding of our global climate dialogues like COP30, connect with local realities, and why community driven action remains central to meaningful change. So, on behalf of NITI, the Policy Lab of Colonial College, we truly appreciate your time and perspective.